So if you're talking about lead generation and you're investing time and money into it, you've got to understand what's working and what's not. And the failures that I see so many businesses have is that it's this throw something at the wall, see what sticks, but after they throw it, they turn around so they don't even know what's sticking to the wall.
From Toronto, PHANTA Media presents the Not So Corporate Podcast.
Hello. It's Mark Drager, your host of the Not So Corporate Podcast.
Who else? Who else would it be?
I don't know. I'm joined in studio with Leah Earle. Hey, Leah.
Hello.
And on this podcast, it's a very special podcast we have this week. I am so excited. We have Chris Leone back on the podcast. He was on the podcast with us in August, and he was talking about some stuff he was working through personally. But this week, we bring him on to talk about his business side. Chris, I've known him for a number of years. We've become friends over time. But Chris and his company, WebStrategies, the company that he works with, they help small businesses and medium-sized businesses market through the internet. They help with lead generation. They help with sales strategies. And so, this ongoing theme we have when people email me, when they tweet me, they always ask about sales. But something that a lot of people don't ask about is lead generation. So obviously, before you can go in and start selling with people, unless you're going to be cold calling them, you need to generate leads. You need to drum up people who are interested in what you have to say. And so, I wanted to bring Chris on because he's helped us for years with lead generation. I thought, who better to bring on to talk about it than the person who does this day in and day out? So before we start the conversation with him, though, before we get him on the line, I just want to take a step back, right? As I mentioned, everyone thinks about sales. They think about, how can I speak to the people who are interested in me? But what a lot of us, when we're starting a business or we're growing a business, we fail to do is just really get creative, like really put time and effort and money and budget into generating leads proactively. It's one thing to think, I can go out and do some networking, or people will find out about me through word of mouth, or I can do a referral marketing program where I ask my past clients to refer me to future clients, or it's enough to just sit and wait for the phone to ring, or to hope that, if I do good work, my customers will tell other people about me. But, all of that stuff is just kind of hoping. It's just kind of wishing. You're just kind of hoping that it's going to happen. And you're not really taking an active role in getting predictable income in terms of, being able to understand this month and next quarter and next season where business is going to come from. You're kind of just being passive, and I understand that. I've been passive in my business, a number of years where you do what you can and you get comfortable, but you're not really pushing yourself. And so, again, I'm excited to bring Chris on because these are things that I learned a few years ago, and ways we've grown the business that I think can really impact your business. So the big question remains is, how important is lead generation for a business? If you don't have sales, you don't have anything to do. You don't have any revenue, you don't have any money, you don't have anything. And the only way to get sales is to generate a lead, is to generate some interest in you in some way. And so I'm looking forward to bringing Chris on, and we're going to get through this. We're going to talk about different strategies, things you can do with money, things you can do without money. Let's get the conversation started with Chris right now. So as I mentioned, we have Chris Leone on the line. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
And so, we were talking a little bit offline beforehand, and obviously the big point of this conversation today is lead generation. How do businesses get people picking up the phone and calling them? How do they get them, visiting their website? How do they just start making sales by people wanting to work with them? I guess the place I'd like to start is, what do you do if you're a business, if you're a new business, or if you've been in it for a few years, but the phone's just not ringing, and where do you start? How do you go from people not really finding you to, yay, the phone is ringing all the time, everyone loves us, everybody knows who we are?
Yeah, well, I think there's a really important point in here, and that's that not all marketing is going to cost you money, right? You don't have to spend money to market, okay? So there's the free kind of marketing, and then there's the not free kind of marketing, right? So if you have money to spend, there's a lot of channels that you can get into. You have up-and-coming channels like social media advertising. You have the more established ones like Google advertising and Bing advertising and search, SEO and things like that. But if you don't have that money to spend, and that's not an option, you have your time. Okay. Now I understand time is money, 100% agree with that. But if there's no money in the bank or you don't have the money available to market, you need to get out there and you need to do it yourself, right? So hustle is the key word if you're not at the scale to start paying for marketing, right? And it can be hugely effective if you're willing to put in the time.
But okay, so I mean, that's fine. I have time. But I already know the answer to this myself, but why don't you share for the audience who doesn't? What do you do? What do you do with yourself?
Yeah, so any good business and a business that's built for the long term is built at its core of referrals and word of mouth, right, from its network. If you're new and you don't have that yet, you need to be focused on doing that. You need to build a nucleus of people who know you, who trust you, who respect you, and who are willing to recommend others to your business, right? So if all you have is your time, then you need to get out there and start making connections with these people. This could be offline networking, going to events, getting established at those places, getting to know people, shaking hands. Now, it's not a quantity thing. You're not going out there and trying to hit as many people as possible, but you need to go out there and make meaningful relationships. You can do the exact same thing online too, right? You can go to social networks like LinkedIn or Twitter and find people who are in your market who might be part of your target audience, and then you have to start engaging them. And you have to be memorable, right? Just following or retweeting someone or liking a status update or sending a request to connect on LinkedIn, that's not going to cut it. You've got to get into a conversation with those people somehow, some way, and then you have to do it with a level of frequency that you're going to start to establish a relationship with them. If you can then layer on top of that a face-to-face and a real conversation, that's going to be someone who starts to become part of your real social network, right? That's how you start to build that nucleus. And then when those people or someone that they know enters a buying mode for your service, you're going to be the one that they think of.
That's interesting because as part of our own marketing strategy here at the company is I love networking. Like, I don't personally love networking, but I mean, as an idea for our company, for people to get out there, networking is a huge thing. And what we found early on is we used to just go to Board of Trades and to, all these different events and there might be a lot of people there, but okay, so the event has 100 or 200 or 300 people, but you can only talk to 8 or 10 or maybe even 15, but I don't even think that many. Maybe I'm too introverted. But you talk to a handful of people, and then you all go back to work. You go on your merry way. You get their card, they get your card, you might be connected on LinkedIn, but there's nothing really there. And so what we kind of established in our organization is we would only go and really chase after and really invest in and put ourselves in situations where we could see the same group of people over and over again. So, if there's a kind of network where there's a monthly event or a quarterly event, and you can go back and see 8 or 10 people, but then the next month you see the same 8 or 10 people, and the next month maybe a few people aren't there, but you meet a few more, and then they take you to meet other people, and by doing that kind of quarter after quarter, year after year, you're much more likely to build a long-lasting relationship by just keeping your numbers really, really small and only talking to people that you genuinely like and you get along with, rather than try to go to these things and somehow meet hundreds of people and hope that that's going to turn into business.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go out and just try and get as many business cards as you can. I like the approach that you're talking about, but what I would add to that is to leverage digital to your advantage, right? So you go to these events, you get to know these people, right? Or that they're part of this group. Then when you come back, think about all the people that you met and then prioritize it, right? Because if everybody's important, no one's important. So figure out the people that are most important to develop a real relationship with, right? What I do and what I know others do, this may sound a little creepy, but I actually write their names down and I say, here are the 5 people that I want to make sure I keep up with, right? Then you can use digital tools like LinkedIn to go and say, tell me a little bit more about this person. Or you could find their Twitter, and you might find out that they're a big Yankees fan, and you're a big Mets fan, so you're going to rib on them the next time you see them because your team got to the World Series and theirs didn't, right?
Did you win the World Series?
We got to the World Series, Mark. I think that's a pretty good accomplishment.
Sorry, go on.
You can use these digital tools to know a little bit more about them so that when you go and you see them next time, you have something to talk about, right? But again, narrow it down. If everyone's important, no one's important, okay? Focus it on the ones that maybe are best known in your marketplace, or maybe you're a B2B, a business to business, in a business to business industry. And so you're only focused on people at that event who are in other B2B spaces, right? Versus the B2C people, the retail people that maybe you don't mingle with as much, right? So narrow it down, use digital tools to find out a little bit more about them. And then those become the people that you prioritize when you go to these events. But you got to do a little bit of homework on the back end too.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I have something that I took from someone else, which is a top 50 list, and I have 50 people that I consider, professionally friendly with. Like we know each other through work, but they're not necessarily clients. They're just people that I like and people I want to stay in touch with. And I find it really challenging to try and stay on top of 50 different relationships. So I have, a document that I use that just shares with me the last time I reached out to them, when I saw them, why I saw them, when should I reach out to them again, what should I be looking for? And I don't, want that to come across as cold and calculating. It's just a tool that I use to make sure that these people that I genuinely like, that I stay on top of them, stay in touch with them, because otherwise, knowing my personality, like a year can go by and I haven't reached out to someone. I'm like, oh yeah, like I still think we're friends, but maybe after a year they no longer think we're friends or something. So, it's just as simple sometimes as just reaching out to people, right?
It is. You can use these digital tools to connect with them so that you're not waiting just until the next face-to-face in order to have some type of, engagement with them, right? So you get back, you follow them. If they say something that's that you can chime in with, you comment on it or you share a thought. Or if you come across something that makes you think of them, send it to them, right? Say, hey, I came across this article. It's kind of about your industry. It's about the type of stuff that I specialize in. Just so you know, I'm just sending it to you, to happy reading or whatever, right? If you're a little more calculated in that way, you're going to be able to manage it a lot better, right? Don't feel guilty that this is like insincere or anything like that. The reality is that we have, our networks are so much bigger than they ever were in the existence of humanity, and our minds are not designed to keep up with that. So if you have to use a spreadsheet or a list to know who you want to prioritize in your life, I don't think there's any reason to feel guilty about that.
I do that in my personal life.
What's that?
I do that in my personal life.
You do that in your personal life?
I do. When I meet new groups of people, like when I first started working here, I would have written down everyone's names. And then as I learned information about them, written it in like a book that I have. And then known that like, okay, like Roland's wife's name is Elena. Like when I met a whole bunch of new friends the past year being on mat leave, I did the same thing. Because I have a hard time remembering things. But if you remember something about someone, you can build that relationship faster.
Mm-hmm. Weird.
Yep.
I don't keep it forever, but like for the first
do you
few
release
months.
it in some kind of like burning ceremony or something? Like you just burn it and you're like,
I have journals and journals of everyone I know.
Okay, so we're talking about free things. So that's the first one. Now the next one.
The second one is producing information about what you do, right? This is the content play. In the digital space, it used to be that you could manipulate and reverse engineer the search algorithms, right, to generate leads and get good rankings and get more people to your site and get more leads that way. But that just doesn't work anymore, right? So Google is putting so much emphasis on good content, right? And if you have a wealth of good content about what you do and what would resonate with your target market, that's a huge, massive asset that you can repurpose into a lot of different ways down the road. So again, if you only have time, and before we get into the direct response, marketing techniques, I would recommend that you pretty much brain dump everything that you know about your topic, right? And get that onto your site, frame it in a way that's more about solving problems and answering questions than it is about selling, okay? And let me kind of tell you what I mean by that. So most people are not in a sales mode at this time. They're not, or I should say in a buying mode at any given point in time, right? You have people you have the small minority who are actively looking for your type of service. Then you have a lot more people who are somewhere in the buying funnel. They know they have a problem, but they don't know that you're the solution for it. Or maybe they know that your type of service is the solution, but they can't do anything about it now. You have that group of people, right? And it vastly outnumbers the people who are in a buying mode right now. And then you have those who are not in any type of buying mode. They don't have a problem. They aren't seeking your type of service, and so on. So I think where the deficiency is in marketing are the people who are aware they have a problem and are maybe starting to look around at services but are not in a buy now mode. Okay, and those are the people that I think you need to invest time into. So how do you invest time into those people? This is where content can become a huge, huge play. Okay, so when people realize that they have a problem or that they might need a service like yours, but they're not quite sure, they're going to search engines and they are searching for answers for their problems. Okay, how do I do this? Or how much does it cost to do this? Or what are the benefits of doing this? Right? And when I say this, fill in the blank with your service, right? And if you are the only one who's actually invested time to write about the ROI of your type of service, or who are saying, here are the 7 things to prioritize when you're hiring this type of service, most people aren't going after that type of content. Most people are in that buy now marketing mode. So you have an opportunity there to get your content towards the top of search engines when people are searching for those types of questions. They get to your content, read that content, you are answering their question, you're providing value to them, right? And then you can start to work in some other kind of other little tactical things to get that person to stick. And that could be getting them to follow you on a social network. So now they're kind of subscribed to you. It could be getting their email address in exchange for a piece of downloadable content or something to that effect, right? But the point is that if you can provide value to that person earlier on in their buying journey and get them to stick, then when they enter into the sales mode, you're going to be the first person they think of.
Okay, so if you're someone who has this time available and you go, you know what, I do have free time, I do know that I got to do something, and I can dump all my information on paper, do you just drop it in a blog, or what do you do with that?
Well, creating content takes time. It takes a lot of time, right? So you want to make sure you're spending that time wisely. Okay, so the first thing I would recommend before you actually put any words to paper or you start videoing yourself, talking about something, is to understand who your target market is, okay, and who your target persona is, okay. So, persona marketing is detailing in a very specific way who you're marketing to, okay. And the way we recommend doing it is to create a fictional character of your ideal customer, okay. Give them a name. Write out what their common traits are, what their day-to-day activity is like, what their role is at their company, what their family is like. I mean, all these things. You want to think of this person as a real individual, okay? And then you need to start to understand what their journey is like, okay? So if the first piece is the persona piece, the next piece is their properties, the properties that they go to, right? So you know who your target customer is. And the next question is, well, where do they go? What do they look at online? If they're maybe an older demographic, they might be more on LinkedIn if they're a professional. If they're younger, they're on some of these more hip social channels like Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and Vine and things like that. But you got to understand where they are, right, before you start producing content. Because the last thing you want to do is produce content for a blog and then realize that your target market isn't generally going to blogs, right? But if you understand who the persona is and then you understand the properties that they go to as part of their buying journey, then it'll become pretty evident what type of content you need to create.
Okay, so that's free stuff. Those are what we can do if it's free. I guess on the other side, it's paid. We were talking offline about some statistics you were sharing with me. Can you just walk us through, what that is again? Who's spending what? How are they spending it? How are they making decisions? How much should people think about spending?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is good. It's just to get a sense of what other people are doing out in the marketplace, so you understand what generally companies are prioritizing and how much they're investing and where. Ultimately, your strategy is derived by your target market and how they behave, but this will give you a general idea. So when we talk about marketing budgets, there's a couple different tiers to this. First of all, how much should you be spending on marketing in general, right? Now, this varies by size of company, and it varies by industry and how much they rely on the internet to generate sales, okay? But generally speaking, you could be anywhere in the 8 to 12 or even upwards of 15% of your top line should be reinvested back into marketing. Okay, so let's just take for round number 10%. Okay, so if you're a $200,000 a year business, you're spending $20,000 a year on marketing. Okay, now of marketing, what do you spend online versus offline? Now, again, this is going to depend on your type of business. Bigger corporations are spending a lot more on offline marketing, like TV, than smaller ones who can't afford a TV budget. So the smaller you are, generally, the more you spend on digital marketing relative to offline marketing. Okay? And usually it's more than 50% if you are a smaller business. Okay, so 10% of your top line goes towards marketing, and maybe 50% of that or more is going towards digital. Okay, now when you're talking about digital marketing, how is that spend getting broken out? Okay, so we see in the data that we look at that about 45% of digital spend in 2016 is going towards search. Okay, so that could be paid search and it can be SEO as well. With paid search, you're paying the search engines to be shown. If you're paying for SEO, you're paying either an agency like mine, or you have people in-house who are getting your site ranked on the search engines. But again, 45% of your digital marketing budget is going towards search engine marketing, okay, or some type of marketing through search engines. And we see that number is staying about the same over the next few years. Social media, big topic. A lot of people want to know, how can I do more with social media? And has social media killed Google? Yada, yada, yada. Well, it turns out that in 2016, social media is going to represent about 15% of total digital marketing spend. That number is probably going to increase a couple percentage points over the next year, but still it's in that, between 15 and 17%. Not a huge number, especially relative to search engines. And then email marketing. Okay? Email marketing, the oldest, probably most tried and true digital marketing tactic, is only expected to spend about 3%, is only going to represent, 3% of digital marketing in 2016, and that's going to stay about the same as well for the next few years. Interesting side note on email marketing, although it is the smallest channel relative to digital ad spend to these other channels, it still represents by far the highest ROI out of any digital marketing channel. So highest ROI, but it's also the most cost effective.
That's interesting that social media gets obviously all this hype and spend is holding where it is, and yet email marketing, the thing that's going to provide the best ROI for you, is something that people overlook or aren't even increasing budget into.
It is really strange, but I think the reason for that is, first of all, email marketing can generate a lot of direct response, right? You can get a lot of people to respond to your emails and actually come to your site and take an action. And we see the rates for this are almost always beat all these other channels. But email marketing is so cost effective because if you have a database of people, it doesn't cost really much to send out that email, right? But it can have a big impact. Now take social media, for example. Now social media is not so much a direct response channel, and I think this is where people really, really struggle, is that you can't put out a tweet and think you're going to make a lot of money off of that single tweet. That's not really social media's play. Social media is about trying to develop connections with people and relationships with people so that eventually they will buy from you. It's the same reason that when you go to a networking event, you don't expect to come home with more money. Right? You expect to come home with a connection or a friendship or a relationship that can then turn into something later down the road. It can turn into new business. But social media is in that same boat in that it doesn't generate direct sales from its activity. But it's still getting some money because I think there's so much hype around it and people understand that there's value in it. But it is a struggle to see sales coming directly off of it. And also, there's so much new stuff coming out all the time that I think, for the most part, businesses haven't really figured out. How do we staff for this? How do we play on these platforms? What type of people do we need to manage it? And so it's still the Wild West in that regard.
So that's really interesting. So we were able to walk through, I love where we're going with this, some things you can do if you have no money but time, obviously where people are spending their dollars currently. I suppose, if you are willing to put budget behind stuff, that opens up a whole bunch of different opportunities and channels for you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Yeah, a lot of channels and a lot of things that you can go into, and a little bit more experimentally as well, right? Because you can afford to do it at that point. But I think no matter how much money you have to spend, you want to define your 4 Ps, right? What I call the 4 Ps: persona, who you're marketing to; your properties, where they go; path, which is the order in which they go, the sequence in which they go to those properties online; and then the purpose, which is what you want to be achieved in each one of those steps. Okay, so if you've figured all that out, essentially what you have is who your target customer is, and the places they go to online, and how those fit into the context of the buying funnel. Okay, and the buying funnel, if you're not so aware of what that is, it talks about kind of the psychological steps you go through as you're looking to buy something. And this isn't just buying, B2B services. This could be buying anything, right? So in the beginning, it's somebody who just understands that they have an issue that they need to solve. And then they start to go out and say, okay, I know I need this type of company to solve it. Then they go out and they find the different companies in their market who can do it. Then they start talking to them. They develop a preference of who they want, and then they purchase, right? But if you look at the far ends of the spectrum, on one end, they're actually making the purchase. And then on the other far end, they're just becoming aware that they have a problem that they need to solve, but they have no idea how to do it. Okay. So now once you've defined all those things, okay, and you have a very clear idea of the path that your target customer takes, then you can start to explore things like, getting more active in paid search, for example, paid social advertising, where you put posts out on social media and you pay money to promote them so that they stay more visible, right? You can also do prospecting through paid channels like Facebook and LinkedIn, right? The great thing about those social networks is they have all this demographic information about their members. So you can go in and say, only show my ad to people who are between this age group, who have kids, who have these type of jobs, who live in this area, right? So if you're starting a service or you have a service that appeals to middle-income families in a certain market, and that it's generally women who reach out to you for first contact, you can you can either promote an ad on social channels trying to get people to come into your site and contact you now, or if you've written great content that they're going to want to see and that they would get value from, you can write it and then promote it on social channels and drive people into your blog that way.
Okay, so that sounds pretty B2C though. What about for the B2B marketers? Do the social channels still work for putting spend behind it?
Oh, they absolutely do, and it's not just LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a great play for B2B if you're looking to try and promote content and get more people over, because you can be very specific about job titles and businesses and industries on LinkedIn. But we've seen research recently that said that Facebook's actually more effective at doing just that than LinkedIn is. Okay, so I think it works. I think it really works for both B2Bs and B2Cs. Provided that you really understand who your target customer is well. The reality is that no matter whether you're B2B or B2C, you're on these social channels at all hours of the day, and so you can get visibility to your content and you can get visibility to your brand as well.
I hate to bring this up right now, but what is B2B and B2C? I just don't know the lingo.
So B2C is business to consumer marketing.
Okay.
And B2B is business to business marketing.
Okay.
So if you are marketing a product to mothers or to kids or to teens or to anyone who's a consumer, Apple.
B2C.
Apple is both a B2B customer, a sales company, and a B2C, right? Everything that goes towards the consumer is B2C, but then they have business services, which they don't really market too much, but you can be a business on their business services and you get an account manager, and that would be the B2B sale. Us as a company, we're B2B. We sell to businesses, but our clients can be B2B or B2C.
Right.
There you go.
I gotcha.
Good question, though. Thanks for circling back. Chris, I had Well, I was thinking, to me, it's all,
No, I know.
it's all
yeah,
jargon.
Totally.
So
But if you're new, you're like, what
if you're like green
sounded
and
like
you're all
something
like,
dirty. That,
yeah, it's not dirty at all. It's not dirty at all. Let me ask you a question, Chris. And I think this is a mindset. I remember when I was starting my business, I was speaking with someone who at Sandler Sales Training, and that if you guys know Sandler Sales Training, it's basically like executive sales training. And I was speaking to them as a business owner, and I was complaining about the fact that I couldn't afford a salesperson, and he just seemed baffled by that. He's like, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, I just don't, I don't have money." And looking back on it, I realized that I was probably in a bit of a victim mindset. I was in this mindset where I was like, my business isn't big enough, my business isn't good enough, I can't recruit people, I can't hire people, I don't have budget, I don't have money, it's not sustainable. And I was just thinking of all the reasons why I couldn't do something. And the reason why I think he was so baffled by it is because if you do it right, there's an investment, but then there's a payoff window where you get your return on investment. I think that many small business owners right now go, I can't afford to spend behind marketing. I don't have the money. We're not big enough. We're not sustainable enough. What we do, I don't know how to do it. Like I think they're in the same mindset I was when I was starting, where I knew I needed it, but I couldn't figure out how to make it happen. Do you think that's pretty common in this case? Where and what would you say to someone who goes, I just can't? It's nice that Mark, you can afford it, but I can't afford to put spend behind PPC or social posts or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, as I said, earlier on, you got to be laser focused with this stuff if you don't have the money, right? If you really don't have the money to spend, you don't have the money to spend, right? But you always have your time, right? If you don't have your time as well, I'm not sure why you're in business, right? Because it doesn't seem like you're giving enough or you're making enough available to actually do anything. But I get that mindset, and I get why people have that state of mind just in general. Is you think, I can't do it yet, I'm not going to be big enough yet, I'm not going to be big enough yet. But I think that's why people's individual time is so undervalued, right? So again, if the money doesn't exist, the money doesn't exist, right? But the reality is, for us, like our business, WebStrategies, we went, I think, I want to say almost a decade, probably a decade, without really investing in any of our own marketing. Like at all. We were a marketing company that really didn't market ourselves in the traditional sense or even in the digital sense. Now, sure, we wrote content. We held a couple events here or there, but never really enough to say that was our marketing strategy. But the way that we became so well known in our market is that we went out there and we got visible. And you don't just become, you don't just join these groups, right? You want to become visible in those groups. Right? So you want to get leadership positions in those groups. You want to volunteer your time. You want to become as visible as you can. And we built a business, right? Over $1 million a year in revenue business, doing just that, and not spending any money on social media and not spending any money on Google advertising. Okay. All we did was get out there, become visible, get positions of, in leadership positions within those groups, do really, really good work. Right? And for the first decade of our existence, all of our business came in word of mouth, and we grew every year that we existed. Okay. Now it's only at this point where we said we want to diversify a bit more, right? And we want our sales to become more predictable, where we started to make investments in other areas. And that's the phase of our life that we're in now. And it took the kind of money that we didn't have to play around with 8 or 9 years ago. But it did take a meaningful investment, but we were hyper-focused on it. We were very disciplined about it. We tracked it down to the T to say, if we're going to invest in these channels like cold calling, if we're going to invest in these other types of lead generation channels online, we're going to say, this is the expectation and this is what it's got to do. But in only a year, we've totally flipped our lead generation method. Okay? But it took a heavy investment, and we had to get to the point where we were ready to do it. And before that, it was just our time.
And so let me ask you, if you're contemplating, if I'm someone who's contemplating putting budget behind, marketing spend, we all know, like, let's all agree, everybody needs a strong website. Okay. So that's not really what we're talking about. You need a strong website. If you're a photographer, you need a great portfolio. If you're in video, you need strong examples of work. Like, let's all put that aside. But just, if I was going to put budget behind Google AdWords, so that way when someone goes to Google and types in my service, an ad pops up, or doing posts, or maybe I'm a video company and I want to take my videos and put them on YouTube as paid placement. If I'm going to explore these types of things, do I follow your kind of, you said 8 to 15% of revenue, and so let's average 10. So I take 10% of revenue. Let's look at some numbers. If I was a $200,000 business and I took 10% of revenue, that's $20,000 a year. If I'm spending 50% of that on paid placement, that's $10,000 a year. If I break that up monthly, that's $800 a year roughly. Do you do it that way and then say, this is the bucket of cash that I have to work with, where do I go with it and how do I maximize it? Or do you look and say, well, my average cost of sale is $5,000, and so then my average cost to acquire a sale can only be X number of dollars, and if I can only afford X number of dollars, I can only, and working backwards up the funnel, if I can only spend X dollars, I take my close rate and then work backwards to see how much I have to spend. What do you do?
Yeah, so I would start with the first step just to get an idea, right, of what is sanity when it comes to marketing spend. And that is to work those numbers back, to say, here of a business of my size, here's probably how much I should be, using for marketing budget. Okay, that gives you just a baseline, just a general idea, right? Now, but I think what is more important is to do the second part of what you said, is to work those numbers backwards and to understand how much you're willing to pay to generate a lead based on the rate at which you're going to close them and how much they're worth. If you can figure out those numbers, and they're not difficult numbers, right? You're just, what's the average sale? What's your close rate on leads? And then, you just work those numbers backwards. The next thing you know, it's okay. If I can, as long as I generate $500 or less on a lead because my cost of sale is so high and my close rate's high, I'm in good shape. If you know that formula, then anything that you do, any marketing that you do, can always be tested back to how effective it is at getting people in at that cost per lead. Okay, we advocate strongly to all of our clients to know what that number is. That way, whenever we try something, we have a very clear pass-fail test.
And how do you get comfort with that? I've had conversations with people in the past, maybe even you, let's say, but I've had conversations in the past with people, and I'm pulling numbers now because I don't remember the exact numbers, where I'd say something like, it cost us $2,500 for that project. That's completely unreasonable. And then someone who's not emotionally, engaged with it would say, well, what's your cost of sale? What are your profit margins? Blah, 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 blah. If that's the case, it still makes financial sense. Heck, you should triple your marketing spend because it's still right size up. How do you get kind of comfortable with the emotional, I guess the difference between taking the money that I have to earn, which is hard-earned money, which is net profit, not gross profit. It's money that I've earned, and I'm taking it out of my pocket to put it towards spend, knowing that hopefully it will return leads and hopefully that number works. But it's still money, if I find myself spending $5,000 a month, I still quickly in my head go, oh my goodness, I'm spending $60,000 a year on marketing spend. That makes me really uncomfortable. But I know rationally you worked out the numbers and, blah, blah, blah. It's the cost of doing business. It keeps you in. But how do you deal with that emotionally? Do you?
Well, yeah, right. Well, this is what's so interesting about it is 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I feel like people weren't asking these questions as much, right? But now that we're in a time where we can measure it so much more, it's like before, it's like, yeah, throw it at newspaper, throw it at TV, and you couldn't measure it at all, right? All you could do is look at total sales, right? If you watch Mad Men, you see the only metric that they look at was well, the sales are up in that region, must have been us, right? Must have been our great ad campaign that did it. But you can't really tell. I mean, there could have been so many other things at play, and there likely were. But today, you can see very clearly, when it comes to digital marketing, I spend this, I get this, right? So, I mean, you gotta look at those numbers. You gotta be comfortable with those numbers. I will say most business owners generally are more numbers oriented, and if they can see that, they feel comfortable with it. But it doesn't stop some from saying, yeah, I understand how all the margins work and everything like that, but it's still a lot of money, so I'm going to keep doing TV. So, I think that sometimes that emotional part leads to some more rational decisions, and it's a little unfortunate because if the numbers work, The numbers work, and you got to work to the numbers.
And so if, here's another little trick that we used to use a long time ago. I don't know if you still use it or not, but when we used to help people out with paid search, like I'm talking like the first year in my business, we only did it for about a year, and then we realized that we just were a video business. We shouldn't be doing it. But we used to onboard people with like $5 a day spend, or, just like, this is a long time ago too, but just really small spend just to get them used to it. And then when we had a few months of saying, oh, the phone's ringing once every day, or 3 times a week, we would then, without telling them, like completely jack up the budget and like quadruple it or go like 10 times higher for a 1-week window. And then we would turn it back down again. And then afterwards we'd go back to them and say, hey, did you note, did you get more leads last week? And they'd be like, you know what? I don't know what was happening, but we got, blah, blah, blah number of leads, and this is so great, and I don't know what's happening. And then we would say, well, we were spending the appropriate amount that you should have been spending all along, and I'm glad you're not mad at us because you got all these leads, but if you were mad at us, we were going to figure out a way to apologize later or cover the cost or something. And then we would prove to them why spending a certain amount of money was the good amount of money to spend. Is that like something that still happens today, or that we should almost as business owners trick ourselves into doing? Like, yes, it's uncomfortable to think of spending $2,500 for a 3-month campaign, but maybe just put that on the line and try it. And if it doesn't work, turn it off. And if it does work, hey, you've learned something new.
Well, when it comes to paid search, what's so beautiful about it is you can turn it on and off pretty quickly, right? So you don't necessarily need to run like a $2,500 a month for 30 days in order to see if the more money helped or not, right? You just need to get to the point where you have a good enough sample size, right, to see what it's producing for you. So when I talk to clients, I usually advocate that we start with, if they're brand new to it, and depending on their industry, because sometimes the cost per click is obviously much, much different in more competitive industries, so they can burn through budget pretty quickly. Like you say, $5 a day, an attorney, that's maybe a click, right? So it's going to take you a really long time to see if anything's working. You buy 30 clicks in a month, you're going to have people convert at a pretty high rate to see if even that did anything. So to me, it's more about generating enough scale in the beginning so that you can understand what the economics are. So I might go to a client and say, all right, if you're brand new to this, let's just start with maybe between $500 and $1,000 for a month. Okay, we're not necessarily going to spend all that, but we want to be able to drive a few hundred or a couple hundred people into the site from this channel with these keywords and see if they convert or not. Okay, and we may be able to figure that out after spending only half the budget, right? Or maybe spending, almost all of the budget. But then once you have that, you have those numbers and you have that formula, and then you can go back and say, you want to see if we can spend more, and I think we're going to generate the same return. Again, most business owners will look at that from our experience and say, if I can get the same numbers with more spend, I'll spend all day. But you got to get that proof of concept first, and to me, that's more about getting scale so that you can answer that question quickly.
Two questions. First, can you walk me through, I guess, how you make a decision from a regional versus state or province level versus a national? And what does that do to, I guess, just cost of playing in those different areas?
I mean, national is always going to be almost always going to be a lot more expensive. And the tricky thing about when you go to national targeting for something like paid search or even paid social is you're getting people in all these different markets who might behave slightly differently, who have different competitors or who are looking at different alternatives to you. So you have different competitors in these markets. And also you're just opening up a bigger pool of people, so it's usually going to be more expensive. So when I start like a paid search campaign, and I almost always start with paid search because anyone who's clicking on a paid search ad is usually like in a buy now mode. So
that's Google AdWords.
Google AdWords, Bing, Bing paid ads, not display advertising, not social media advertising.
Sorry, what's Bing?
What's Bing?
Chandler's last name for friends.
Right.
That's it, Chandler's last name. He started the search engine.
Awesome, cool. Is Ask Jeeves still in the mix?
That's number 3, actually.
No, is it really? I was
It
making
is?
a joke.
No, it is not. No, Ask Jeeves is now just ask.com, I think. I think that's what they.
I didn't even know that was
that's
still a thing
sad.
too.
Well, poor Jeeves is out of work.
Yeah.
Well, he was kind of old back in the day.
Is Yahoo
so-
still a search engine?
Is what?
Is Yahoo still a search engine?
They
I don't even know.
They
They?
are. Yeah.
And what about AOL?
AOL as well. No, but you pull the curtains back here, and a lot of these, like some of these more second level or third level search engines, are powered by some of the bigger ones.
Oh.
So if you advertise on Google, you're going to be getting pushed out to a lot of the other smaller search engines.
I just recall that back in the 90s, AOL keyword Oprah was used to be the thing. Like, make sure you go to AOL and type in Oprah, and you can come to our site. That used to be the way to do it, I think. Right?
Wait, what?
Back in the 90s, like when they used to send out all those discs when AOL was taking over the world.
They had the
and
internet?
you pay for minutes.
Okay.
My understanding is there wasn't. I wasn't on the internet back then. There was no search engine, right? Google didn't exist. Other things didn't exist, and because people were new to it, they didn't remember web addresses, because back then you had to remember the web address and go to the web address.
Right, like you had to,
So
like-
America Online had like a search area where you could type in a keyword. Oprah or NASCAR or whatever
this
you
was
want.
So you could watch Oprah?
No, so you can go to their website, so you can learn
Oprah's website.
to Oprah's website. Yes,
Uh-huh.
because I don't know. Do you remember this, Chris, or are you too young too?
No, I mean, I was on AOL. I definitely remember the AOL days, but I don't remember typing Oprah into a search.
Maybe you weren't the
bar.
right demo, but I
Yeah.
was. Anyway,
You were.
no, I remember the
As
very
a little
first
boy
time.
in the 90s, you were like,
My
I
mom
gotta
watched
check out that Oprah.
so I remember the commercials. But I remember the very first time I ever went on the internet. Nice little side trip we're going to take here. It was I was in grade 8, so I guess what was that, 96? Something like that. And I went, my friend said, let's go on the internet, and I didn't know what to do. I said, what do you do on the internet? He said, you just surf.
What did you guys look for?
I went to the only website I knew of, which was NASCAR.com.
Oh,
No, Oprah.
And then I was like, is this it? And he's like, yeah, you're on the internet. I was like, this is really boring. Anyway,
didn't-
side trip. Sorry, back to what you were saying about search engines.
Yeah, so if you're going to start, I always advocate that you go after the most targeted, relevant audience that you can. Okay, and then you start to build out from there. So what I mean is, even if you maybe serve nationally, that you pick out your best markets and your best keywords, and you start with those. Because if you can't be successful with those, you're not going to be successful if you go broader, right? So you want to start out as narrow and targeted as you can. You want to get proof of concept with it, and then if you see that it's working, then you can start to expand from there. But you got. And anytime I have a client who wants to go national with their targeting, I kind of gulp first, and I think, all right, we got to make sure we're very. We got to be careful with this, because I think when you do national targeting, you can spend and waste the most amount of money the fastest.
Mm-hmm. So can I take you back? So 10 years ago, when I worked for an internet marketing franchise that Chris may be familiar with, I remember hearing my first keynote address on paid search, on pay-per-click or AdWords. And the philosophy at the time was, you set your budget or whatever, you figure your budget, but you work really, really hard on determining the keywords that you want to go after, and maybe split testing or just really honing in on the keywords. And then once you know that you're getting traction with keywords because of impressions and whatnot, you then continually hone away on your ads, on the ad copy, and you try different things, and you get the best you can at ad copy. And then you continually tweak away on your landing page, the place that you're sending the ads to make sure that you're doing the best you can. And then you continually tweak on a conversion point, or on trying to get people to call you or watch something, or download a white paper or sign up for your newsletter, whatever it is. And even though you have all of these steps set up throughout, if you continually split test and tweak away on your keywords and then your ads and your landing pages and then what's happening on the landing page, and you do that over and over and over and over again, that's essentially kind of the secret approach to just making the most out of your spend and generating leads. Is that kind of still the rationale today at a high level, or have things changed in the last 10 years?
No, that's still pretty much it. The levers that you can pull to have an effective paid search campaign are the keywords that you target, where the ads that you're using for people to click through to your site, and then the site itself and what it says once they get there. And what I always say is the better that you can align search intent with what you're actually showing people, the more successful you're going to be. So what you don't want to do is create an ad and target keywords. So for example, if you're in the lawn care business, you don't want to go buying the word grass, because someone who searches for grass, their intent could be a number of things. It could be, I'm going to go seed my own lawn. I'm looking for some marijuana. I'm doing it doesn't necessarily mean they're looking for a lawn care company if they search the word grass. Okay.
So you might want to go with like how much does a lawn care company cost or something like that?
Well, that's super specific, and I think that could be good. But that's going to be really low volume if you're going in a local market. But if you are a lawn care company and you target the word lawn care company, then you can be pretty sure that anyone who searches for that is looking for you, for your type of business, right? So you want to get that as tight as you can, right? So and it usually means not targeting a single word. It's usually a string of 2, 3, or 4 words together. Okay, so you want to build that list. Okay, the ad itself is where the rubber meets the road, and what I mean by that is if they don't click it, it's never going to amount to anything for you, right? So you have to make sure your ad is enticing enough to get clicked. Now, one of the big mistakes that I see people make, especially smaller businesses who are less experienced with this, is these ads that show up in search it's not like you're designing a branding ad or a billboard ad or some sort of creative like ad. So don't get hung up in I'll say it this way. Don't evaluate the ad that shows up in search the same way that you would evaluate like a graphical ad, right? And how you would critique it and when you talk about look and feel and the message and all that stuff. The only thing in the world that ad is trying to do is to get someone to click, okay? So you're going to use copy in that ad that you would probably never put on like a higher quality, maybe image ad that you put, and run in a magazine or a banner or something like that. In the ad, you want to have that keyword in the ad itself. You want to have some sort of incentive or a reason to click, and then you want a call to action within the ad itself. Okay. So what you do when you split test those, what we usually do is that we usually run 2 ads at the same time, always for the same grouping of keywords. And you let it run for a month, and you see which one gets a higher click-through rate. Higher click-through rate means it's more appealing to the people who are seeing it. So then what you do after 30 days is you pause out the one that didn't get the high click-through rate, and you write a new ad, and that becomes a new challenger up against the one that won before. You wait another 30 days, you see which one has a higher click-through rate, pause the one that has a lower one, write a new one, and you just keep going on and you do it that way. And when you manage it that way, you're guaranteed that you're always going to have incremental improvement. It's not going to go from 3 to 5%, but it could be 3% to 3.2%, then to 3.3, then to 3.6. It's just like these little steps along the way until you really figure out what type of ad copy resonates and gets people to click. Okay, so that's the second lever. And then finally, the third lever is the landing page and where you send people, right? And that's when you want to go back to the search intent. If someone is clicking on an ad based on this keyword, how well does my landing page speak to that keyword? Because that's the thing that's in that person's mind at that moment in time, right? So those are the things that you can adjust along the way to get better performance. And as long as you have your goals set up in Google Analytics, or if you're using conversion tracking in AdWords, you'll be able to see this many clicks resulted in this many conversions, and then you'll be able to do your cost per acquisition that way.
Now, I've always taken the approach, I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy, and I worked for companies with backgrounds in this, and I could probably figure out how to do all this stuff myself. But despite the fact that we're in marketing, I've always turned to other organizations to do this, and for a number of years, you guys have helped me with this. So do you recommend that people just jump into this and try this themselves because we're all in marketing and we're all smart people? And I'm not asking for a sales pitch or anything, or do you recommend that really this is in itself is such a difficult, challenging. You need experience. You need to know how to not make mistakes or turn something on or switch a switch that just suddenly wastes all your budget. Would you recommend spending the little bit more to pay a firm like yours to handle this?
I really would. And the reason I say that is we've taken over so many accounts, like hundreds of accounts over the years, some of which were self-managed, others that were managed by companies that I just didn't do a very good job of it. And you end up wasting so much money. And pretty much in every case where we took it over from someone self-managing it, they might as well not have had it turned on. It might have been producing some leads, but it was coming at such a heavy price that it wasn't really worth it to them. Now it's a fairly intuitive. I'm not sure if I would say it's an intuitive tool, these ad platforms to set up, but you could probably figure it out just to get something up and running. But it's usually the value that these firms like mine who specialize in this, what we do and what we manage within these types of campaigns are usually the big difference between success and being unsuccessful and being a waste of money. It's knowing the nuances of what you want to target, how you want to target it, how you want the keywords to be targeting so that they show to the right people at the right time, and that you have the right tool set up so that you can measure success. So you can get in there, set up ads, add keywords, and do all that stuff. But there's so many places you can get tripped up along the way, which will cause you to waste quite a bit of money and probably not even make it worth your time.
Can I hit you with a quick fire round, Chris?
Sure.
Here we go. We're going to try and do some quick fire questions. What's the most common reasons why businesses fail at lead generation?
I think they're focused on the shiny stuff. They're not focused. They're focused on the hype and not necessarily what's actually working for them, and having the systems and metrics and discipline to know whether or not it's working.
When it comes to paid search, what's more important in your mind, to rank high often, or to actually work through the kind of colder, more calculated return on investment kind of placement?
I would say it's the latter. I don't see a correlation between ranking high and getting that first, second, or third slot and having a good cost per acquisition. You got to know the numbers, and if the 8th spot on the search page is the highest ROI, that's where you should be.
Isn't that counterintuitive though? Like, again, part of the emotional, like not wanting to spend too much money because there's a lot of money. I mean, being 8th and only getting 1/5 of the clicks you could potentially get, that doesn't make me feel good. I want to rank high all the time.
It's that, you see, so another reason not successful, seeking vanity instead of sanity.
Are you saying that vanity's not good? I love vanity.
Vanity doesn't keep my lights on.
What steps do most companies struggle with when it comes to either paid search or to lead generation?
I would say, it comes back to, it's a similar point that, we have clients who would rather go off script and do things that are not going to support the numbers, even though the numbers are proven, because they want to, kind of inject their own strategy into it. I'm not sure that's a good answer, but it's pretty much when people try and tell us how to do it, and even though we have the numbers working in our favor, they think we should be targeting other things, and it lowers the efficiencies and gets a higher cost per acquisition as a result. So let me say it this way. Good question, Mark. It's not letting the experts do their job.
I think anyone in a service-based industry can relate to that. What's the number one thing that people can be doing to dramatically improve their lead generation?
It's not about an individual tactic. It's about, in my opinion, having the metrics so you understand which channels are doing which and what they're producing, and then having the discipline to go back and evaluate them on a regular basis. Right? So if you're talking about lead generation and you're investing time and money into it, you've got to understand what's working and what's not. Okay, and the failures that I see so many businesses have is that it's this throw something at the wall, see what sticks, but after they throw it, they turn around, so they don't even know what's sticking to the wall.
Okay, so let's say that we know that we have all these great free things we can do, and we're going to start hustling. We know that we got to start somewhere with spend. We're going to put spend behind it. What would be some good resources? What would be some good next steps? I don't know if let's say that I don't know if I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to turn to a company like yours or what have you. But what should just one do to make sure they're in a position of knowledge and not going to be kind of taken for a ride by people who promise the world and do all these weird kind of negative tricks that just aren't good anymore?
There's so much great information online about how to approach marketing for whatever size business you are. I definitely recommend going out there, doing some searches, and seeing what people recommend. You're going to come across a lot of different sites. You'll start to put together, common themes. Okay. I also recommend that you seek out people who are leaders in your space, right? And start to observe what they do and how they do it. Okay. And these are things that you don't need fancy tools to be able to do. But if there's a conference, for example, in your industry, see who those speakers are, see who their companies are, and then see how those companies behave. And then that can become the model for what you become.
So that was a conversation with Chris Leone. I'm so happy that he can come on the line. Again, Chris is the Chief Operating Officer at WebStrategies. They're an internet marketing company in Richmond, Virginia. As I mentioned on the podcast, they do our internet marketing. They have helped us generate leads for a number of years. And so if you're interested in reaching out to Chris, you can find him on Twitter at Chris Leone, Leone, or you can find their company, WebStrategiesInc.com. Again, if you want to reach out to him, I talked to him offline when we weren't on the podcast. He said, if people have questions or comments or whatever it is, just reach out to him. He'd be more than happy to have a conversation with anyone who's there who wants to ask him some questions, throw them at him, see if you guys can work together or whatever. Just reach out to him. He's a great guy, and I'm sure he'd be able to help you out. So that was our podcast for the week. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to Leah for joining us. She's not sitting in right now because she had to run away for a baby daycare emergency. But anyway, thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. We're rolling now.
There's more to it.
So